and so many different approaches to one material, and what you can do with it is like a canvas to
it's endless, isn't it? Endless possibilities. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Beer Rep Chats With, and the final episode of our Fab Four series. And today we're talking about malt, and I'm delighted to be joined by two guys from Muntons, Ben and Simon. Thanks for joining the show.
Hello.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're going to go over a bit of a quick history of Muntons. For listeners who might not know the name, obviously there's many people know you guys in the industry, but as customers and listeners, they might not know what Muntons do. Give us a quick history of Muntons and how the business has grown over the years.
So, we started as a company in 1921. We've been doing what we've been doing for, over 100 years now. We've got a couple of sites across the UK. We're primarily headquartered in Suffolk, in Stowmarket. We are based on, funnily enough, an old parachute factory, which, as World War One ended, we took over the factory to start producing malt, because parachutes were going out of fashion, basically. Since then, we've been creating high quality malt from British barley. We acquired a site in up north in Yorkshire, and a peating plant very recently in Tythe Top to supply our distilling customers with smoked malt. And we've just been continuing to work hard on our fundamentals of providing really good quality malt to brewers, distillers, and providing the food sector as well with malt extracts as well, and also brewing customers with malt extract as well.
Yeah. Can you explain what malt extract is to people that might not know?
Yeah. So malt extract is basically kind of like a concentrated wort. So we've done the hard work of doing a mash, basically, and doing the wort separation, and then we evaporate it. So it's just a concentrated wort that you can use for various applications, whether that be our dark products that can add a bit of color and a bit of roasted flavor to a beer. So you can tint up a beer that's slightly too light, or boost your original gravity in the brew house by adding a bit of malt extract. And makes for a super easy brew day if you go to all malt extract as well. No spent grain to deal with, and
pretty similar to like the old extract kits you used to get from Boots for the older generation listening in.
Yeah, absolutely. We are a massive supplier of those kind of malt extracts for homebrew. If you are a homebrewer and you're listening to this podcast, you probably hopefully know and love Muntons homebrew kits. It was certainly what got me into brewing. It's how I started as a homebrewer. So
I think that's how most people start, Ben, isn't it?
Exactly.
With that malt extract can that you need to warm up, and then.
Apart from me, I didn't start that way. I dove straight into the all grain recipes on the Grain Father. I was just thinking, if I'm going to do home brewing, I want to do it. I'm going to learn everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, never got to try the extract kits, and I've never actually used any of it actually, either malt extracts. It's all just been all grain for me at the moment. Yeah, what do you think some of the key moments that have really shaped Muntons over the years?
Well, I guess a kind of key thing for us has been looking at our sustainability. I can't really put it on a timeline. I don't know the company quite that well.
Plus, you're not that old.
Well, exactly. Yeah. When the company's 100 years old and I'm just 31, it's a bit hard to give a kind of lived history. We are always working super hard on our environmental credentials. We've been investing in biomass boilers to power our kilns to do the drying and to provide us with steam for kind of all of the processes we need on site. We have a anaerobic digester on site, which your listeners may not be super aware of, but it allows us to take our wastewater from, because malting uses a lot of water. Basically, we're steeping barley to make it germinate, and then all of that water needs to go somewhere, and it's very high in kind of things that you wouldn't want to put in a river, basically, or down the sewer. So we treat it. We can generate biogas from that, and it's a very good source of biogas to further lower our carbon emissions out of our processes, which
sort of like a renewable energy kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we we're setting targets every day basically to drive our sustainability, make our processes better, make a greener and cleaner.
Yeah, that sounds great. The whole UK is behind renewable energy. For anyone new to brewing, homebrewers mainly, can you kind of break down the malting process in a simple as you can? What actually happens during steeping, germination, and kilning?
Sure. So I guess I'll pick this one up. So basically, malting is kind of like just starting the process of growing a barley plant. So if you imagine try to grow anything, I'm sure people have a bit of experience with growing something. You want to get the seed wet to so it can start growing. So we do, for us, that's called the steeping process. So we'll mix tons upon tons upon tons of barley seed with a certain nitrogen specification to it, and various other like quality checks that we do before we even start the steeping process. Mix it with a lot of water and aerate it to mix it to give the kind of like the seed a chance to soak up some water. We'll typically then drain it and give it what's called an air rest. That allows the kind of barley to overcome some of its like dormancy and start that process of just beginning to form a little rootlet. We'd probably then soak it again and use air again to kind of give it a nice like boost of some oxygen to get going. And also, bubbling air through everything. It's a really good like mixer. And if you've got to just mix a huge amount of material, it's really useful to do that. Also helps blow out the CO2 that's forming, because obviously we've got is a living thing. Everything that's living tends to, just like us, just breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2. So once we've done that process, obviously for every barley seed, there are different varieties, and we're trying to maybe aim for a slightly different product. How we steep with water, how long of an air rest we do, the temperature that we do for steeping is all slightly different for different products. But the aim of that steeping is, just to get water and oxygen into the barley seed. And from there, we begin the process of germination. So that just means we've got a little plant, it's beginning to grow. And what we're aiming for in the germination process is to begin breaking down the kind of internal components of the barley to make them more accessible for brewers. So, we begin breaking down, the complex proteins that are holding together all the lovely starch molecules that will go on to become the alcohol and the flavor of beer.
Is that the endosperm, isn't it?
Exactly. We're breaking down, the endosperm, the cell wall.
I've done a bit of research.
Yeah, not good, I can tell.
Nice.
So we're turning a very hard, not crushable at all endosperm into that kind of white, fluffy, very crushable material that everyone knows and loves from malt. So A professor that I used to study under described like malting as basically a similar enough process to what goes on in a mash tun, but we're doing 95% of the work basically across, a week, and at a lower temperature, but we're still, the same processes are going on. There's starch breakdown so that the plant can harvest sugar to keep growing. There's breakdown of proteins to give the growing plant like the nitrogen that it needs. There's all sorts of we'll use maybe a little bit of like a gibberellic acid, which kind of boosts the growth. It boosts enzyme production within the barley. And kind of like speeds things along a little bit. So yeah, the kind of germination process, like temperature, time, it has a massive impact on the final product. The longer we allow germination, typically the more modified the malt will be. And modification is this really key parameter for a lot of brewers. You have this, everything in malting is kind of like a balancing act. Like in all brewing, to be fair, in most industry, everything's a balancing act. You can't get everything you want all the time necessarily. So as modification continues, all of the starches, all of the proteins become more and more accessible. But because the barley has grown more into a plant, it means there's less accessible stuff. So you're losing sugar, you're losing proteins to just the plant growing, which we then, knock off the bits that are the plant itself and still leave you with the modified seed. So for some brewers, they want a really over modified malt because it's so easy to break down. It has a suitability to, working with a mash at just a fixed temperature. So like an isothermal mash. But other brewers want a really under-modified malt because it retains a lot of the protein, which is really great for like a mouthfeel and a head retention. But the problem is, getting to those starches to give you that beer on an under-modified malt is more challenging. But every brewer is different, and that's part of what I love about the brewing industry is like you have the same material and so many different approaches to one material. And what you can do with it is like a canvas to
it's endless, isn't it? Endless possibilities. Yeah.
So yeah, that's steeping and germination. And
the kilning.
Yeah, exactly. And then onto kilning again. That's kind of where our end goal, I guess, is to provide something where we've stopped that germination process. We've kept the enzyme activity that brewers will need to carry on it when they do the mash. And, we want to get down to a moisture level that means the product is shelf stable. Because if you have if we were shipping around living plants, one, it wouldn't crash in the mill. And two, it's a bit of a, finicky thing to work with. I certainly have problems keeping my house plants alive. Certainly, if I was a brewer, I wouldn't want to be worried about keeping my malt alive, So
I stay away from all flowers in my house. I don't deal with that. Yeah. And they still die. They die anyway, but at least I'm not the one to blame if I stay away from them.
Yeah. So the other thing that we do when we're kilning is we begin that process of kind of flavor development of like those roasted kind of notes. So we can kiln at hotter, again, time, temperature, the different temperatures at different times you use has a massive impact on that final kind of like quality of the malt and the different product that you're aiming for. So for the kind of like lightly colored malt, so for example, the kind of the lagers and the pales will have a kind of
your Marisotters.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Marisotta, like a pale Marisotta, for example. You'll have a very kind of like gentle kilning process where we're not looking for so much color development, and the aim is kind of just to dry the barley, but malt at this point. And yeah, kind of develop those kind of like more bready, biscuity kind of notes, as opposed to going really harsh on the kilning, where you can develop some more kind of a bit of the kind of like darker end of notes. So not necessarily as high as like coffee or chocolatey, because that's a roasting process which is separate. We can start to develop kind of like caramelly flavors a little bit, or kind of like nutty, I guess is maybe the best way of describing the flavors coming out of it.
Yeah, so that'd be like a light Munich kind of.
Yeah, exactly, like light Munich, exactly. That's the spot.
Like Vienna and stuff like that.
Yeah. Caramel, all them sort of.
Yeah, well, caramel is an interesting one because that's a slightly different process. Again, that's a malt that hasn't really undergone its germination process, and it's the barley is steeped and has a very, very short kind of like germination time, if any at all, and is siphoned straight off into a roasting drum. So you're you have like next to no enzyme activity because the barley hasn't gone through that kind of like germination process to build all of those enzymes up to make the sugars more accessible. But you have this wonderful kind of, the complexity of like just a unmodified barley, which has been roasted to develop, like, just as the name says, like all those lovely kind of like caramel, nutty, verging on very light chocolatey kind of notes. Just like caramel is one of my like absolute favorite malts, to be honest. I will happily just eat handfuls of it. I have to pick it out of my teeth afterwards. It was always my favorite one to brew with.
Make some flapjacks with it.
Yeah.
It's probably got the nicest aroma, hasn't it, when you're brewing with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, sweet.
Yeah, you're only supposed to use it in certain amounts, though, aren't you? In most recipes, I would say up to 10% or 20% of the grist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's partly because you want to retain some kind of like enzymatic activity to kind of do all the conversion of starch and all the residual sugars that are left in the barley. So you're kind of limited by that. But also kind of like flavor wise, a lot of these malts can kind of have a bit of a like off taste when used in kind of huge proportions. No size. That's something that you agree with?
Yeah, totally, man. They're really strong on this. So apart from like the fact that you need the enzymatic activity, you also need the extract. So the more of that you use, the less sort of extract you're going to get to ferment with. So aside from that, it's like a little balancing act, isn't it? Like if you think about it, sort of cooking, you only use garlic in a very small amount, or you'd only season a certain amount, and it's a similar sort of mindset when you're putting your grist together. Look, you can get around it by using lots of different sort of varieties of malt to give complexity, but not have to use too much of it.
So during the mashing process and brewing, can you describe what happens when hot water interacts with the crushed malt grain? Obviously, we've been speaking about the different types of grains, but what actually happens when water interacts with that?
Yeah, so I guess kind of the first thing that happens is your malt, the starch is, so malt is an important source of one, carbohydrate, which is the thing that yeast will turn into alcohol. The carbohydrate is kind of in many different forms. You have like dextrins, which contribute to the mouthfeel of your beer. Like if you were to take all of your carbohydrate and just turn it straight into alcohol, you'd be left with a really thin kind of beer that just tastes very like just boozy. For some people that's desirable. That's also kind of what distillers do, to be fair. But for a brewer, that's not really ideal. There are proteins that you extract from the malt to, one, to do the conversion of starch. So that's kind of the enzyme activity. Protein is really important for yeast health as well, because yeast requires a source of nitrogen to grow and reproduce. There's also all sorts of like trace minerals in malt as well that support the growth of yeast. But in terms of what happens in the mash tun when you mix water with malt. First thing that happens is your starch granules begin to like swell and go through this process called gelatinization, which is basically like, imagine starch is just like a tight ball, basically. At mash temperature, that ball kind of just like relaxes out. So the kind of all the starch kind of unwinds and becomes accessible to enzymes. So the main enzymes that we look for in malt are kind of alpha and beta amylase, which kind of go along and chop up starch into maltose, which is kind of the main sugar that originates from malt. But it will also chop it into longer chains like kind of maltotriose, maltopentose. Again, all of these are kind of yeast can utilize to turn into alcohol. But the longer chain sugars that are chopped up, those are what we call dextrins, which, as I was saying before, kind of contribute to the body of the beer. Yeah, starch gelatinization and conversion is one of the main things that goes on in the mash tun. Obviously, brewers usually check whether that process is complete by adding a drop of iodine to a little spoonful of the mash. If you see it go a kind of blue, blackish color, then you know there's still starch present. So you need to see that process kind of continue on. With like most malts in the UK now, I'd say, especially for, kind of the craft market, are generally well modified. So that process is usually quite quick. It's usually kind of 30, I've seen as quick as 15, but people like to leave it a little bit longer because you're extracting loads of other things as well.
Yeah, I think 60 minutes is a standard mashing in for most brewers.
Yeah, but it's definitely something I'd recommend to a brewer is like, have a look at, for your equipment and your malt and your mash profile, have a think about how quickly your conversion is. There's nothing
because you can cut down time, but also energy consumption as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, depending. I mean, so for a craft customer, I guess their mash tun is usually, it doesn't have much heating to it. So, you've kind of done the energy consumption already of just mixing the hot water, which you've already heated with malt. But for the big commercial breweries where, they'll have steam jacketed mash vessels, it can definitely, and also time is a valuable thing for a business.
Yeah.
And mash.
So obviously I have a grain father and it's always heating during the mash because it maintains the, your temperature.
Yeah, definitely.
So if I was to check it 30 minutes in to make sure that it's all done, then I could probably cut my mashing in to 30 minutes because it uses up a lot of electricity.
No, exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the things I remember from homebrewing as well is like the grain father does just eat energy basically.
It certainly does.
Yeah, look at my electricity bill after I've been brewing and I'm like, what is going on?
It's crazy, isn't it? It's like literally boiling the kettle for 5 hours.
Yeah,
we all know how much energy kettle uses electricity wise.
Exactly, yeah.
I think it's time, isn't it, for like the smaller brewers? If you can knock half an hour off your brew day, might make the difference between, I don't know, finishing at 5 or finishing at 4:30 in the day, and that's, I don't know, if you brew 5 times a week, that's quite a lot of saving, like.
Exactly.
Or saving the electricity bill as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's definitely worth having a look. There is 60 minutes is just the rationale for mashing for some reason. I don't know why.
It's boots and braces, isn't it? Like,
it's just become the norm, isn't it? Like you mash 60 minutes, that's it, and then a 10-minute mash out at 75.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing. Is just like it's easy to take a scoopful of mash and just test it with some iodine, and as soon as it's done, it's ready to go. Basically,
so if it goes a dark blue, blackish color, that means that there's still some starch present.
Exactly. There's still some more starch that needs converting. And so you need to leave it a bit longer.
You need to leave it a bit longer. So what colour would it go if it's all completed?
So iodine is kind of like a yellowy colour. So it's quite similar to wort as it is. So it doesn't really particularly change colour. It's kind of a bit, I don't know, a bit like, it looks a bit kind of brown, I guess. But the blue kind of blacky color is kind of like an ink almost. So it's very like a distinct color. Obviously for, homebrewers, getting hold of iodine isn't the easiest thing.
Let's move on to another question. If you could give a few examples of a difference between some, base malts, specialty malts, and adjuncts and roasted malts. Like, what's the difference between all them?
Yeah. So I would think most brewers are probably using like a generic pale ale malt, for example, if they're making a beer. That would normally come in a couple of different variants. So the variant in this way is normally colour. So you would have like a standard pale malt, maybe like 4 EBC or something, 5, 6 EBC, and then you'd have an extra pale. And that would depend on what beer you're brewing. There's a slight difference in flavour. So generally the darker the malt, the stronger the flavour. The lighter the malt, the sort of...
more biscuity.
Yeah, the more sort of, it's on the lighter end of the flavour spectrum. So most brewers are using an ale malt of either pale or extra pale. Some brewers are still using Marisotta. Not a huge difference with Marisotta, so flavour-wise it's perhaps a little bit stronger. But colour-wise you will be getting the same sort of colour as a normal ale-based malt. Marisotta people like to use it because of the name. The customers can relate to Marisotta, but it's becoming like increasingly less popular with brewers because it's not grown as much, so it's also a little bit harder to grow and it's a little bit harder to malt. So there's like a price premium on Marisotta. So I think any brewer that's ever bought it will realise the premium sometimes doesn't necessarily outweigh the benefits of it.
Yeah, the flavour they're going to get. What are customers kind of using to instead of Marisotta? What they buying?
So variety-wise, our main variety for base malts is a variety called Planet. And the variety has less of an impact on the brewer at the end of it. There's an approved variety list for farmers to grow for use in malting and in brewing and in distilling. And that list's quite small. There's maybe 4 or 5 varieties on that are preferred by everybody. But that's just because it gives good nitrogen, it gives good extracts, gives good everything that the maltster wants, that the brewer wants. So not a huge sort of difference, really.
And it's a good, the varieties that we use, typically, it's, as Simon said, it's good for brewers and good for us as maltsters, but also it's good for farmers as well because the yields are a bit higher. That's certainly the big kind of negative of Marisotta is just the yield is very low compared to Planet or Craft or Laureate is the other really big one that we supply. So, it's kind of an interesting one for us as maltsters in the middle, kind of juggling relationships between farmers and brewers and try to keep kind of everyone happy along the way, which I know that we certainly struggle with at times. I think every maltster does. It's because everyone wants everything, but like I said, you have to balance, and especially when you have challenging harvests like we've just had, brewers still want the best that they can get, and we will give them the best that they can get. But it's definitely more challenging for us, and it certainly has been quite painful for farmers this year.
Yeah, it leads me on to our next question, which is like how the barley production has been recently. Has the weather patterns or farming conditions made things a bit more challenging for them?
Yeah, I mean, so kind of 2024 into 2025, it was kind of like a perfect storm for barley farmers, for malting barley. Basically, you have 2 seasons for barley. You can have winter barley, which is planted, as the name suggests, in the winter. And you have spring barley. We take both types. Primarily brewing is mostly spring barley, but you can request winter barley as well. And there are some benefits to it, but there are downsides as well. So the winter barley in late 2024 suffered like a disproportionate amount of rain, basically, which kind of didn't set the crop off quite right. let's say. It's kind of like, again, we're in the business of dealing with plants. So, imagine kind of drowning your house plant. So that kind of already set the harvest for 2025 of the winter crop just off wrong. So when you have too much rain, farmers are applying nitrogen, and bearing in mind we want quite a low specification of nitrogen, just because the more nitrogen you have, the less carbohydrate you'll have, and that means worse extract. It also means like problems with like haze potentially in the final malt. But yeah, so the winter crop kind of didn't get off very well. And then kind of spring rolls around, the spring crop went into the ground like absolutely fine. There was the right amount of moisture for it to like go in. But then the problem was we had a really, really dry summer. So again, sorry, Psycho.
Well, long, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And because that it was so dry, the barley didn't quite get the chance to like develop in the way that we would want it to. So, I believe kernel size is a lot smaller this year, and that's a challenge. One for farmers to like actually harvest the grain, because the harvesters are set up with a certain kind of kernel size in mind, and anything smaller than it will just fall on the floor. The same with our maltings, our screens are set at certain sizes, and it's challenging to change all of that kind of equipment for like a smaller kernel size. Again, it translates all the way through to the malt, where if you have a smaller kernel size and your kernel size
less starch.
Well, not necessarily less starch, because it's a smaller kernel, so it weighs less, but it's got the same amount of starch, like generally. Okay. So there's the same amount of starch in a kilo. The problem is really when you're trying to mill your malt. So if you've set your mill gap for a grain size of 2.8 millimeters, for example, if you have a kernel that comes along and it's 2.2, it might go straight through. Exactly. And then the real challenge is, how do you adapt to that, especially for the big industrial customers, where again they have the machinery designed for a certain kernel size, and anything smaller than it will just end up in their kind of waste stream, which is not good for them. It's a challenge for us, but we inherit that challenge from the farmers, and it's it's not just us that has to deal with that challenge. That's the malting industry in general. So yeah, I would say 2025 has definitely been a very challenging harvest for farmers, maltsters, and now kind of brewers are beginning to see the challenges that we've been facing as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you work closely with farmers to keep everything as consistent as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a dedicated team in Muntons that deals with, we call them lovingly the grain team. They work very closely with our grain merchants and our farmers, just so we can get a sense of, what's the market price for barley. So if it's going down, that's great for us and great for brewers as well, because the price of the malt will go down. We also get a bit of a heads up as to, what's happening as the farming season kind of continues, our yields potentially looking, if there's a massive shortage of barley, if there was a crop failure, for example, we're running around looking at how we're going to make up that shortfall. And likewise, if there's a shortage in barley for feed as well, that obviously has an impact on the market for malting barley as well. So we have a whole team dedicated to it at Muntons. I think it's certainly a challenge for them, keeping a close relationship with farmers and merchants and kind of giving the guys in the maltings like a heads up as to, what's going to happen basically. So we definitely work very, very close with our grain merchants and farmers.
Yeah. Also, one thing that you work very closely with is your sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you tell us a bit more about what some of the big actions you've taken to make malting more environmentally friendly and stuff like that?
Yeah. So we are always setting ourselves goals to kind of improve ourselves. So a big one for us is we've set a science-based target initiative goal, basically aiming to be, believe it's carbon neutral on our electricity by 2035. And I believe that covers all of our sites. So Stowmarket, Bridlington, at the top. We've also got a plant in Thailand that does malted ingredients as well. So, our challenge for that is global. And so that's a really good challenge to have. We, like I mentioned before, we've got anaerobic digesters on our site, which take our wastewater and turn them into something useful, a form of biogas, and then also kind of a liquid slurry that you can use as a fertilizer. We've got biomass boilers across all of our sites that provide steam for heating processes that is produced from like wood chips, basically, and forestry byproducts. So, the idea is that it's very, very low carbon because, wood was grown from CO2 that was in the atmosphere originally. So you're kind of having a closed loop, basically, of CO2, minus all the transport and everything. And, it's a byproduct of forestry, so it was going to get created anyway. So, so that's some of the kind of stuff that we've been working on. We're continuously looking at how we can improve like our malting process. And a big thing that we've been working on as well is like getting our kilns to run more efficiently because, they consume a massive amount of energy in kind of heating the air that gets blown into the kind of wet malt. And then all of that moisture just kind of gets blown out of a chimney, basically. So you lose an incredible amount of heat. So we've been looking at, how we can heat more efficiently. Can we potentially recycle some of that heat? We've been looking at, improving our processes because every little incremental change you make, and, if you can, say, as we were saying earlier, like we are a malt extract factory as well. So we do that mashing process. So if we can do it quicker and use less steam and, produce more with less, that has a great impact on our sustainability as well. Much like other brewers, our spent grain goes to feed as well. We're a really big supplier of a company called Diney. We're one of their biggest suppliers just because we have a very consistent output of our malt extract factory. We're working really closely with them on seeing if there's anything more sustainable we can do with our spent grain. Like, could it be turned into a food product, for example, and not just, for human consumption rather than to cattle. So that's a really great thing for like food security. And, could it become a fuel, for example? So it's, we've got our, we're looking into lots of different things, and it is a challenge, but it's a challenge that everyone needs to be thinking about and doing their bit on, which we're certainly proud to say we are doing our bit. And we've got credentials from EcoVadis that show we're in the top 5% of companies globally when it comes to sustainability, and we're pushing to be in the top 1%. So we've got that attitude of good is good, but we want to be great and we want to be the best.
Yeah, that sounds really good. What does like sustainability grown barley mean in practical terms for you guys?
So we've got a couple of different systems that we work with. So I guess you can look at sustainability in terms of like business sustainability. So we want to make sure that farmers are getting a fair price for their barley. We have been working a lot with kind of regenerative agriculture systems. So that means kind of systems where you're keeping soil health high. So you're extending kind of, getting past that idea of, we have 40 harvests left and we're extending that kind of thing. So keeping the goodness in the soil, which is great as well because you get less runoff of fields and less river pollution, which is a big challenge in agriculture. We Also, as part of this like regenerative agriculture system, you use less pesticide and less fertilizer as well, both of which have these kind of sustainability challenges and just are quite damaging to the environment generally. So we've been working very closely with groups of farmers on these regenerative agriculture products. Yeah, so that, for example, that would be our our best form of sustainably grown barley. And we have, for our sacked malt customers in the craft sector, we can promise that 100% of the barley coming from that is regeneratively grown. So we pass on those carbon savings associated with the sustainable growth to sacked malt customers.
Yeah, awesome. What kind of like projects or innovations are you working on that you're really excited about?
We've got a lot of really interesting projects on at the moment. So we've got 2 researchers in new product development. I'm one of them. I kind of focus more on the soft drinks, beer, distilling side of things. So a lot of the work that I've been doing at the moment has been on like new forms of malt extract for different applications. We're also starting to look into how we can change our peating process a little bit to provide distillers with a new kind of interesting taste. And, peat is a really difficult material to work with. Extracting it is a really harsh and horrible process that kind of scars peat bog for like generations, basically. So primarily, I've been looking at just new forms of malt extracts and applications of, the kind of dark malt extracts for coloring up beers. And, say you wanted to, this maybe isn't so much something that a craft brewer would do, but for industrial brewers, it's quite common to have like a base beer that's, brewed to like 7 or 8%, that you then kind of water back. And you can add some coloring to kind of change the flavor a little bit post filtration. So that's a lot of the work that I've been kind of looking at to kind of simplify that process for industrial brewers.
What sort of industrial brewers would they be? Like we're talking about the big global.
Yeah, exactly. Big global people. Obviously, I can't say exactly who.
Yeah, we won't mention their names. But I'm sure people can guess.
No, well, I mean, I think. I would say everyone is up to it, but I think it's a really good hack to know as a craft brewer as well, because if the key in beer is not only producing something great, is producing something great consistently. And
would that also work with like all styles of beer, or was it mainly for ones that obviously, because if you're watering back, wouldn't that create a bit of less body in the beer, make it a bit thinner?
It depends on what you're aiming for. Typically with the style of brew, it's called very high gravity brewing. So the idea is that you brew to like 8%, give or take, or 7.5, 7. And the body is too malty, it's too cloying, it's too everything. It's designed with that kind of dilution in the end in mind. So you would have thought that you would end up with something really thin and horrible, but no, it's kind of the whole process is designed with that final dilution in mind to give you that product that people kind of know and love. And the reason for doing it is it's more efficient. You get more through your brew house at one time. The cycle time is a bit quicker. The yeast is stressed, but does some very interesting things as a result. You have some very interesting like flavor development. But with the malt extract kind of story, is a really useful thing for craft brewers to know, to say, I didn't get as much color development in boiling the wort as I would have liked. So my beer is a little bit lighter than I would have liked. And the last thing you want is a customer to come up to you as a brewer and say, this doesn't quite look right. This doesn't quite taste right. It's missing something. So that's where, using a malt extract, it can kind of help balance out those problems. And, one of the challenges I really love about beer is that consistency challenge. is saying, I'm making a great beer and I can make a great beer every day of the year. And that's is a real challenge. And having that, those products to make up that shortfall is a great tool in a craft brewer's arsenal. Because if the big boys are doing it, why shouldn't craft beer?
Yeah, malt extract's been used by traditional family brewers for decades now as well. So they use it if they're making like maybe a mild or a dark mild or whatever. So they'll take their bitter, liquor it back to dark mild strength, like 3, 2 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then they'll tint it back up with a malt extract. So it gets used quite a bit in that sector, but it's not really used by craft customers. And it's probably because they're not measuring as much as what a macro could do. Like macros are talking about like small increments that sometimes you can't even see with the naked eye, but they'll have a spec to hit. So that's where the malt extracts will come in really good for tinting beers up. But in a craft brewery, it's probably better for like boosting extracts for basically brew house extension. I don't know if you're brewing a double IPA, if you don't want to use dextrose because you think it'll pull the final gravity down too much, you could use malt extracts. And you'll get the same amount of fermentability as you would just from mashing. So if you can't fit it in your mash tun and you want to do a 8% double IPA, you can only get
it works well.
Yeah, just boost it up with malt extract.
Yeah, it definitely works well for homebrewers. Obviously, using a 30-litre grain father, trying to get all those oats and stuff in there without getting a stuck sparge is quite complicated.
Yeah.
Using a malt extract on that would be much beneficial.
Yeah.
Really beneficial.
Homebrewers probably use more of it than the craft brewers because they're using spray malt for bits and bobs, and they're using malt extract to prime bottles up for carbonation and stuff, aren't they? So
yeah, I mean, some of the kit you can get for homebrewing now is probably better than some commercial breweries, but
grandfathers, man. Grandfathers are mint.
Yeah, they are. They're really good. Have you done anything recently, or are you involved in anything with like low and no alcohol beer? You know, a lot of new products coming out with yeast as well. Do you guys work doing anything for that sort of area?
Yeah, so we're working with a couple of breweries at the moment, trying to help them deliver low and no. That's part of my day-to-day job, is giving breweries kind of the technical support and the know-how to make stuff happen. So yeah, that's something that I'm actively helping breweries with. We also have a low and no malt extract, basically, that you can add to a work kettle with some hot water, and then add like a preservative and make sure the pH is okay. And it's, you can boil it with some hops and it's ready to bottle, basically. So massively simplifying things for brewers. Like you said, it's a massive and emerging field. A lot of the challenges come from it with just the fact that low and no alcohol, they don't have that alcohol as a stabilizer. You hear horror stories of even, Guinness and Diageo with bottles of 0% Guinness that have had, issues because there's no alcohol to stabilize. So, you can get as bad as exploding cans, exploding bottles, overpressured kegs. So it's something that we're working with brewers to try and provide like advice when it comes to recipes, but also look into how best to support that pint all the way to a customer's glass, to make sure it's all good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was talking to Paul from WHC Lab, and we spoke about low and no alcohol. The biggest flavour-wise for me is taste-wise for alcohol-free beers is that body, especially for like an IPA or a pale. I mean, it's quite easy when you're brewing an alcohol-free lager because it hasn't really got much body to it or anything. It's quite a thin beer anyway. But when you're trying to brew these big hazy beers like you see Beak doing with Nolia, really hop-forward beers, and trying to get that balance between hops and mouthfeel and the body, trying to get the body into a beer, it seems to be the thing that I would focus on more.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real challenge, kind of depending on, keeping that body, like you say, is a real challenge. You don't want too much body. You don't want that kind of like breadiness that a lot of no alcohol beers have. which for some people that's a real benefit. But if you want to do a no alcohol version of a brand that is a customer favorite, sure, it's a real challenge matching that body and that mouthfeel and that kind of malty backbone. There are a couple of different approaches that we can take. We can look into, how we're mashing. So we try and extract as few fermentable sugars as possible. So giving the yeast kind of very little to work with, so you don't ferment very far at all. I think it's almost something where we should almost start working on a malt that is better for low and no alcohol. Like we have, we recommend certain malts, like dextrin malt is quite a good one for low and no, just because it, as the name suggests, it's full of like dextrins, which are by nature very unfermentable. But yeah, it's something where I don't know how you would make it happen, but a malt designed for no alcohol would be a game changer.
Essentially, that isn't it? That's the malt. You want more dextrins, so really high grist in that.
Yeah, really high grist in that. Like 90-80% of dextrin malt, and mash it at a really high temperature. So your starch degrading enzymes, your amylases, they're not doing very much because they're denatured. But you've still got all the kind of protein from the malt there to support whatever kind of limited fermentation you're going to do. And the
yeast that's got low attenuation.
Exactly.
So it doesn't eat up the multi-triose. And
Exactly. Yeah, you've got a yeast that doesn't eat maltotriose, it's maltose negative, all of those kind of things. All of those really great mutations that I'm sure Paul would have talked about. As I geek out on these kind of things because
I find it really interesting that, and different the science part of brewing, because there is a lot of science behind it. But it's interesting to see how it's going to go, because it is obviously growing at quite a high rate. So it'd be interesting to see the products that are starting to come out to help produce better alcohol-free beers and low ABVs. Last question: what's one thing your customers can expect from Muntons in the future?
I think probably more of the promise of the sustainability that Ben's got into. We're like right in the thick of it. We're not going to give up on that. So. Probably that. Still the same sort of great quality malt. Still the same everything that you'd expect from a maltster. Like, I don't think brewers want things to change too much with malt. But it's just perhaps a story around how it gets from the farmer to them, which is all about working with them regeneratively and everything Ben's gone into. That's probably what they can expect more from us.
Yeah, definitely. How's the the yield's been so far this year?
Yields are not too bad. I don't think any of our customers are really going to get affected too much by the harvest. We can sort of blend things together in the maltons. So say if one field's not very good, but the next field is, well, then we can make an okay malt by putting them both together.
Yeah, to meet your targets kind of thing.
Yeah, to meet specifications and what the brewer needs and stuff. So yield-wise, I don't think it's going to cause us a problem.
Sounds good. Yeah. We're going to wrap it up now, but one thing from either one of you to describe something about Muntons that people might not know, a little interesting fact.
I guess, I can think of one, which is we actually have a microbrewery on site. That's my office, basically. So I get to work in a little research brewery, which... I think some days I'm like, I have the best job in the world. We're here to provide technical support, but also we can do trial brewing with our customers. So if any customers are listening, or anyone wants to develop some recipes with Muntons, we can not only just create recipes, but we can trial them and send you trial product as well. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Do Big question though, do you do the cleaning afterwards?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Ben does all that.
Yeah, I had a customer visit recently where I forgot to turn off a tap, basically, and I opened the door and there was a small flood just that made its way out of the research brewery into the corridor, which was not my finest moment. But yeah, I was there with the mop and bucket afterwards. So yeah.
Ouch. Yeah, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. I'm going to let you shoot off. I'm sure you're very busy. But it's been a pleasure to have you on to wrap up the Fab Four series.
Right, pleasure to
Cool.
you.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
thanks for having us.
No worries. Cheers. But this will be our last episode until next year. I'm going to enjoy a nice break, a nice holiday, 2 weeks off for Christmas. Wonderful. So yeah, until 2026, we'll see you again. See you later. Bye-bye.